Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Cedar Falls Board of Education with a reminder that the actions taken at this table will focus on our students and their achievement. With that, I have a public hearing. I'm going to read a statement. I have in my possession an affidavit of publication showing that the notice of time and place of hearing for the proposed school budget summary for the fiscal year 2019-2020. This notice was published in the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier on March 25th, 2019. The board will now hold a hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to come and speak to this issue? Hearing none, I'm going to close the hearing. Moving on to item C on the agenda, public hearing. I have in my possession an affidavit of publication showing the notice and time of hearing for the proposed school budget amendment for the fiscal year 2018-2019. This notice was published in the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier on March 25th, 2019. The board will now hold a hearing. Is there anyone that would like to step up to the mic to have comment regarding the amendment? If not, I'm going to close the hearing. Moving on now to item D on the agenda, a public hearing. I have in my possession an affidavit of publication showing that the notice of time and place of the hearing for the 2019-2020 school year calendar. This notice was published in the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier on March 25th, 2019. The board will now hold a hearing. Would anyone like to make comment regarding the school calendar? All right, we will now close this portion of the agenda of the hearing. Moving on to item E on the agenda, the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
It's been moved by Susie. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded by Jenny. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you. Now we're moving on to public comment. Larry Wyckoff, would you step up to the mic this evening?
Good evening again, School Board Cedar Falls. Larry Wyckoff, 4241 East Park Road, still from the great city of Cedar Falls. You might want to get out your notebooks. I got several points to run through here tonight. Number one, concerning the school board or the new high school, we have a sitting council person who has a conflict of interest in the architectural design of the new high school. Number two, we also have someone on the board who has a pile of acres near the high school site, which is also another conflict of interest. Number three, I trust that Eric's seat will be filled with a fiscally responsible person that's tired of Cedar Falls escalating taxes. Number four, we want to see the two competitive bids that arrived at the $84 million remodel cost and the $86 million new school cost. And number five, finally, where did the $110 million figure come from? 28% increase over the $86 million that, as reported in the Courier last month. We've got a tsunami of numbers here, and nobody that I've talked to says that there's any substantial history of evidence for what all this stuff costs. It just seems like we're spending money like sailors. So let's try to be a little more diligent on these costs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wyckoff. Now, would Miss Carol Lilly come to the microphone, please?
Hi, I'm Carol Lilly, and I am a parent of 2 graduates from Cedar Falls High School. And I just want to say, first of all, that they had a terrific education going through Cedar Falls schools. We moved here when they were in 2nd and 4th grade, and we were very pleased at the outcome of our decision to become members of the city of Cedar Falls. But before that, we had spent 17 years moving around the Midwest. And one of the things that we always took a look at when we were moving from place to place, whether we had children or not, was the school system and the school facilities and what investment the community was willing to make in the future of their community. And as I said, it was something that we looked at whether we had children or not when we were making a decision on where we wanted to live. And I think that the decisions that you all are making are an investment in our future. I encourage you to move forward with a new high school. I think it's very important that we continue to invest in our children and their education. And I know that that's not all involved in facilities, but that is a direct reflection of the investment and the future that we want to have in our community. So I just, again, encourage and ask you to please move forward with the new high school. It's important to our children. It's an important investment in the future, and it's important to bring new people and new ideas into the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Mr. Mike Butler.
Thank you. I'm Mike Butler of 1022 Washington Street. I live just down the street here in the inner city. We had 3 kids go through Lincoln School, the old Lincoln, and I spent about 13 or 14 years there before we finally got a new building constructed. The safety, the heating, the concerns about that building, even though it was rock solid and it took a little bit to knock it down, were a little disconcerting. It is so much better now since I've been through it. And actually, Deb Beving was there when my youngest started, and she was there at the beginning of the new school, and she too was quite happy. At the end of last year, in May, Janelle took me through the high school, not just me, there was a small group of us. And again, I'm at least 15 years out of school here. 3 kids went through high school. All of them got to do the same thing that I had to do as a parent. We're in the north end of the school in a 2nd or 3rd story, and how the heck, you know, I was in the military. I didn't have to run with a compass, but how the heck do I get to the next classroom timely? So you go down some stairs, you go out the west side, you wander through the parking lot to get further south, and you go back in, and then you begin your search again. This is not a very good school building. And then we went to the basement where I saw some storerooms that my kids had stuff brought out of that were now upgraded to classrooms. It is time to move on. We've got to do better and get a nice modern facility for our kids and for our community. It's a selling point for our community. And we need to remind our legislature that this was one of the few taxes that we voted for to pass, and that's that penny to help us get it done. So hopefully this year that comes along also. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. Okay, thank you. Moving on to communications.
Just before, I know Marika's not able to be here, just a couple of responses to, because it's always an opportunity to have some communication as we just heard some of the things that we heard. And I think one of the aspects that it's really important to note, conflicts of interest, that's something that we know is not present. It's something that we have worked very diligently with and through, and board members that serve on the school board, if there is a conflict, have always recused themselves. There's always something that is a question or something that is a concern, then we've always reviewed that to be able to find out how do we make sure that that is done appropriately in the right context. And that has never been something that is a concern or risen to a level that crosses that line. I think that's something that we need to note very, very clearly and very, very carefully. We have had board members that have recused themselves from votes in the past, and that's appropriate. You need to do that. But to be able to say that that is a conflict, it is not a conflict when people recuse themselves and go about that the right way. There's a couple other comments there, and we all want to be fiscally responsible. We're all very mindful and proud of making the right decisions, and as we look at the escalating costs for either construction, renovation, or building, we know that those are increasing significantly over time. So we have to be very mindful that what once was 6 years ago is not necessarily what is today, and we have to look at how do we make sure we spend dollars appropriately and effectively for the sake of an investment into the future for our kids, for our community, and for our city.
Thank you. Tonight we will not have a student board representative. Marika is actually out. She's not part of the golf team, so she's out on the golf course right now. So Janelle, you're up.
Thanks, Joyce. Yeah, with the communications update tonight, we have lots of exciting things we're going to cover. I think the first slide here that you'll see is a great representation of some of the excitement that's been happening at Orchard Hill Elementary right after spring break. They were able to get into some of their new facilities. So this was the first class that walked into the music classroom. Which,
Look at the little girl.
Franz was one of those that I think 10 years she taught in a portable there at Orchard Hill. So it was great for that first day after spring break. All of those students got to see the new music classroom. Just wanted to mention real quick, this is the beginning of our All-City concert schedule. Tonight will be the All-City Vocal at 7 o'clock. It is broadcast live on Channel 15. Next Monday is the All-City Orchestra, starting at 7 as well. And then the following Monday is the All-City Band, where we have actually two concerts, kind of considered North Side and South Side. Those are all at the high school gym, so we encourage, those are free and open to the public, so everyone will come out for those concerts. Also wanted to mention this past weekend was the Iowa High School Music Association Solo and Ensemble Festival, and there were 136 total Cedar Falls Music Department entries, with 103 of those receiving Division I superior ratings and 31 Division II excellent ratings. It's pretty impressive when you consider the scope of the possible ratings you can receive there, so congratulations to those students. There is also then every adjudicator is able to pick one outstanding performance. Out of the 7 center judges, 4 of those were presented to Cedar Falls students. Julia Gray for a vocal solo, William Sims alto saxophone solo, Emma Cryer trumpet, and then Astoria Chow for violin. So big congratulations to all of those students and also to their instructors. Put a lot of hard work into getting to this point in the year. This just shows real quick the music classroom at Orchard Hill. One of the first classes that was there right after spring break, that Monday after spring break. This shows again those kids walking into that classroom. Not sure hopefully you can feel the excitement on those faces. Mm-hmm. This is the heart of the area for the 5th and 6th graders at Orchard Hill Elementary. This just kind of shows another viewpoint of that. We also wanted to thank everyone that worked over their spring break to get them into their facility and ready to go that first day, because it was a lot of work to be able to get ready for that first day back. And a big thank you to the Cedar Falls community for making it possible for that new space for Orchard Hill. They're now actually doing some renovation on some of the spaces that they moved out of in their old gym, so that'll be some new space then opening for them into the fall. Speaking of Orchard Hill and that new space, we're going to be launching a new program called Kindergarten Prep. It's a transitional kindergarten program. So kind of the bridge for those kids that maybe aren't quite R5, but aren't quite ready for kindergarten, but they can apply to be part of the transitional kindergarten program, which will be at Orchard Hill. It'll be one classroom. The information's online right from our homepage on our website for any parents that are interested in that information or to apply for that program. This is just a quick photo of our Rocket Club. They were at NASA with a student launch this past weekend, and they were awarded 2 awards, the Best Rocket Fair Display Award and then the Judge's Choice Award. So congratulations to the Rocket Club. And just wanted to mention real quick, a week ago tonight was the Let's Talk Mental Health community conversation that was held at the high school. Lindsay Finley was there as a keynote speaker. We had a great crowd, a lot of community groups that were there with displays, many parents, students, just general community members, and I think it was a Great opportunity for a lot of conversation, a lot of learning. I think it'll be the beginning of more of these types of things, and a special thanks to our school counselors, Becky Lins from Pete, Carrie Deacon at the high school, and Angela Whitmer from Holmes that put that together. This is this was a Battle of the Books competition that took place at Central Rivers AAA, and this was the Pete Page Turning Pandas. They came in 11th place out of 52 teams that was held there at the AAA, so congratulations to those kids. And this was the Holmes Junior High that competed in the Iowa Science Olympiad. The Holmes A team took 3rd place, and the Holmes B team 4th place. Also wanted to mention Cedar Falls High School was named a Project Lead the Way Distinguished School, and it's just one of 426 across the country that received the recognition this year. So congratulations to especially the instructors at the high school, Dirk Homewood, Ken Swartley, a lot of people that have put some time into making this such a great program for us at the high school. Also wanted to mention, so we took the big state tests at the high school and junior highs last week. It was really fun to see. The high school staff all got together, and many of them went across the community to get donations, and then they made pancakes for those high school students the days they took the test. I think it was Tuesday and Wednesday they did that. Don't tell any of the junior high kids, but the high schoolers got pancakes, so that was pretty exciting, and they all came early, and it was a pretty neat thing to see. Also wanted to mention we'll have our next informational session on the high school needs and facilities will be Thursday, April 18th, 6 p.m. at the cafeteria. We're going to do a similar format that we did in February. There is actually a junior high track meet that evening up at the high school, so I think it'd be a great opportunity for any of those junior high parents to maybe just stop in. They can get a quick tour, they can get some information, ask some questions. So that'll start at 6 p.m. in the cafeteria. I also want to mention we have the Color Dash, the Do Better, Be Better. It's raising funds for scholarships through the organization. It's on April 20th. There's information online as well to get registered for that. And that is all. Any questions?
Any questions from the board?
One remark on the mental health forum that we had. I had a lot of feedback from people from outside of the Cedar Falls community, and they really enjoyed it too. And so I think what we're doing here might spur some action from other schools, and they're very excited at what we were doing here. Did have a question about the assessments. Is there any feedback on how well that went?
We believe everything went well and smooth. We had very few challenges that arose. This was the first year that we did those online. We had a lot of work behind the scenes with testing and some other things within the classrooms, and everything as far as how that proceeded seemed to go extremely well. So now the next waiting game takes place because we won't get the assessments back, I think, until roughly October. So now it's just a matter of seeing how they went for our first year with the ISASP. I'm looking at Dan and Pam for anything else.
Elementary will actually be taking them on the 15th of, starting the 15th of April. We just wanted to make sure that we didn't have technology glitches if everybody was on the system at the same time, but it seemed like it's gone really well.
Good.
Even though all the tests are, I mean, a lot of schools are still taking them by pencil and paper. I know we took them on our computers. Is that the holdup to get them till October for those people who are still taking them on paper, or why, if it's all done online, is there such a lag to get those results?
They have to norm the test, and so it's going to be a process. And with the writing piece, it's my understanding that a computer kind of scores them, but then there's also a human component to that, so it's going to take a while. They've asked for volunteers to assist with making sure that test questions are appropriate and like reviewing it over the summer. And so it's going to it's a process.
So this was more than a bubble filled-in test for those people who don't know that, correct?
Yes, much more rigorous in nature.
And I would also say that, ironically, our students, I think, like the test a little bit better than the old paper pencil test. I think they enjoyed the technology side of it. There's some things that they could do with the online calculator and those kinds of things. They didn't have to bring something with them. So from that perspective, our kids, I think, were a little bit more engaged with the tests than they have with the old paper pencil test. But we'll see how that translates out into scores, too.
Any other questions? Thank you, Janelle. Thank you. Moving on now to item H on the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the 2019-2020 budget?
I move that Cedar Falls Board of Education approve the proposed 2019-20 school year budget as follows: a total of estimated expenditures for 2019 to 20 of $82,056,783, estimated amount necessary to be raised by property taxation for a total of $29,040,944.
Thank you, Jeff. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Jeff. Any questions or comments?
We do have a short presentation just to review for everybody, the information that was presented last meeting.
We unfortunately have to share a microphone, so we're trying to work together on that. So, good evening, everyone. I just wanted to go through the slides that we reviewed on the March 11, 2019 board agenda. On this first slide, you'll see that this is a summary of tax dollars that we've are asking. It's the combined district cost of $16,520,000, which is, if you recall, would be the legislature that would set. We also have the budget guarantee, which is not applicable this year. We have the dropout prevention, which is $882,000. And then we have the cash reserve levy in regards to the special ed deficit, the one-time expenses associated with Aldrich Elementary, and then, of course, our enrollment growth of $1.8 million. Also then the $400,000 for cash reserve, which is a total of general fund of $19,700,000. In addition, we have the ISL, which is our instructional support levy of $2.7 million, our management fund of $500,000, our voted PEPL is $2.9 million, our regular PEPL of $716,000, our debt service levy of $2.4, for a total of $27,778,452, which is a tax rate levy of $13 and rounding of 85 cents. Next slide, please. This slide represents the historical tax rate, and as you can see, the tax rate has decreased again for fiscal 19, from fiscal 19 by approximately 10 cents for a total of $13.85. The divisions, once again, are show the difference between the total tax rate with and without the debt service. So you'll see from fiscal 18, we've continually worked on and have dropped the tax rate levy to this year again at $13.85. Next slide, please. The property tax breakdown. Again, this graph shows for every dollar paid in property tax. In this particular case, 56 cents goes towards the combined district cost, which again is what legislature sets. Debt service would be 8 cents, dropout prevention is 3 cents, and so on, to a total of $1. Next slide, please. The property tax breakdown. This chart shows a breakdown in property tax control. So 57% of the combined district cost is controlled by the legislature. 28% is the voted PEPL, ISL, and debt service, which again the community graciously voted for. And then 15%, which the board actually controls, which is the reminder is the dropout prevention, cash reserve, management fund, regular PEPL, and then if applicable, the 101 budget guarantee. Next slide, please. Again, this chart shows the current tax rate for 2019 and 18 and 19, which was $13.95. For 19 and 20, we have decreased that tax rate for 10 cents of $13.85 for 1,000 assessed value, and in round numbers. As a reminder, this is, we like to review total tax rate for similar size schools. These are the 5 larger and 5 smaller compared to our enrollment. And as you can see, with the exception of West Des Moines and Pleasant Valley, Cedar Falls tax rate is the lowest within that chart. Next slide. This is again just an overview of the 2019-20 estimated expenditures and amount necessary to be raised for the property taxation. And again, these dollars are generated based on the decreased tax levy of $13.85. Next slide, please. We also review at this time the current year budget and determine if adjustments need to be made. This slide is just a reminder of these 2 sections within the Iowa Code that allow for these changes. Again, this amendment is for expenditures that were not anticipated by the budget when originally created a year ago. This amendment does not increase property tax. It only provides the authority to utilize other sources of revenue and reserves. Next slide. And this is, so this is for the current year for the amendments in all 4 categories. The instruction, total support services, and non-instructional programs are due to the Aldrich Elementary startup cost, which, as a reminder, we haven't opened a building in quite some time. And then the other expenditures are due to the shift in the project timeline to fiscal 19 and timing of substantial completion of projects. All of these projects are from our 10-year PEPAL plan, but they have been shifted or payment is projected for fiscal 19. Do I have any questions?
Questions for Del?
Oh, okay.
So, so what you just said is that our property tax rate is going from $13.95 to $13.85.
Correct.
But the article in the Courier said that we were increasing property taxes by 4%. So where's the disconnect?
I think there's two things there. We have what we can control, which is the levy rates, the dollars generated, the 15% that Danelle stated within that presentation that we have control over. Then we have increased enrollment. We have 1-year funding in arrears that we don't get funding for the 110 students that we have to utilize cash for in our bank. And then we count those the year after. Then the legislature sets what our maximum authority is, which we've talked through and gone through with the last several presentations. And that generates your overall authority that you can generate to spend as your per pupil maximum. So what happens is, because we are growing, we have more students, we have roughly $6,300, $6,500 per student that you basically can spend to be able to educate those students. I'm just going to do simple math. You have 110 new students that we had this year. Take that times the $6,648, I think it is this year. That comes out to roughly $700,000. We have to pay that out of cash this year because we're educating those students, but we don't get funding for them. But then you have to reserve and cash reserve back for those dollars coming for next year to recoup those dollars and still spend the educational dollars for those students. So right there, you're increased about $1.4 million, which then kind of translates into why we generate more dollars based on a growing economy, based on growth across the entire Cedar Falls, to be able to spread out that tax levy rate, knowing we're increasing our enrollment, knowing that we have more dollars that we need to spend to educate students appropriately.
So let me see if I state this a little bit differently.
Perfect.
So overall, the amount of property taxes that the school district is going to receive is going to go up by 4%, but that's spread across a greater number of properties and assessment. So I guess maybe stated, so if I'm the owner of a $200,000 house, am I going to see an increase in my property taxes in 19 or not?
Yes, if you have everything being the same because of the rollback. So if the rollback stayed the same, there would have been a decrease. But because that's another component out of our control that we can't affect, that's done through the Department of Management.
Correct.
The rollback is something that is basically set at the state level, so that then calculates differently based on the amount of property tax assessment that we have. So what we can control is where are our tax levy rates at with that decrease. We're happy to report that.
Right.
But then it does spread that out because we have more valuation, more growth across our community to be able to offset the added expenditure to educate students.
So the property taxes are going up, but that's because 85% of that is out of our control.
Correct.
It's 85% of that amount that we collect in property taxes is because of mandates that we receive from the legislature, from Des Moines, and it's not because of something that we as a school district have decided to spend money or not spend money on. It's because those are the guardrails, and we have to play within that system, and we'd love to reduce it, but that's the rules that we have to play by.
Well, we have a max authorized authority that we can go up to, and when you have growing enrollment, you have to serve those students. We just can't say, no, we're not going to serve some students that come to us, and those funding sources are always 1 year in arrears, so you never get funded for the students that you're actually serving in your classrooms the year that you're serving those students. And districts that are declining enrollment, actually you have maybe more funding than you have than the students that you're serving because you aren't having as many students in your classrooms. That's a very precarious position to be in, and you see some districts that wind up actually overspending their max authorized budget. We're very fiscally conservative when we set that budget, and we look at what are the thresholds, what do we spend our dollars on, how do we make sure we maximize our dollars, and that's why we're decreasing that 10 cents, because we have some limited control over that, but we also know that 85% of it's not within our control.
Other questions?
Would it be fair to say that part of this is also because of a shift from state income tax to more of a burden on property tax?
Yes, that has been kind of an ongoing push, and when we moved from allowable growth to supplemental state aid, that's been a shift more towards property tax owners, as well as some of the replacement dollars as we looked at the commercial industry and how that has shifted with the industry rollback that was enacted 3 or 4 years ago now. And that's part of why the residential rollback, I think, is starting to shift a little bit too.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, let's vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you, Danelle. Moving on now to item I, the approval of the 2018-2019 budget year amendment. Can I just move forward with that motion?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
And again, this is the budget amendment. There's 4 different categories, and this isn't an over expenditure and under expenditure. It just means that we allocated certain dollar amounts because we, again, always kind of do a line item estimate on an annual basis to make sure that we try to earmark as close as we can what our expected expenditures are. With the number of construction projects that we have ongoing, the amount of time when those were completed or when they were actually substantially completed, accepted by the board, sometimes even a year after the project, sometimes earlier than anticipated, those dollars get flexed between different fiscal years. So it's not an over expenditure. It means that it fell into a different fiscal year than we anticipated, and we expended some funds quicker for some of our projects than we anticipated. So it's not a good thing, it's not a bad thing, it just is because we earmark and specify where we think our budget targets are. It means sometimes we miss those targets based on, again, being a fiscally conservative district. Some districts, I think this is back to Jeff's point, will authorize their entire max budget. So they'll just say, we are not going to spend over our entire max authorized budget. We don't do that. We kind of target and earmark where those dollars will be spent and what thresholds we think they should be at. But sometimes those targets get missed because, again, things are sped up or they're slowed down.
All right, do I have a motion?
I move that the Cedar Falls Board of Education approve the amendment of the 2018-2019 budget year expenditures in the categories of instruction, total support services, non-instructional programs, and total other expenditures.
Thank you, Susie. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded by Jeff Orvis. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you. Moving on now to item J on the agenda, Dr. Talbot.
Thank you. Proposed agreement with the Cedar Falls Educational Support Professionals. A tentative agreement was reached on March 13th, 2019 on a contract to cover a one-year period, July 1, 2019 through June 30th of 2020. The base wage increase for paraeducators special education would be 53 cents per hour. All other classifications, the base wage increase would be 20 cents per hour. For returning employees, the wage rate increase for special education paraeducators will actually be not as printed 53 cents, but will actually be 58 cents. I apologize, I made an error when I typed up this sheet. The correct increase for all other classifications should read 25 cents, not 20 cents as written on the sheet in front of you. The increase on wages for returning employees, including The 2019-20 longevity FICA and IPAs is 3.90. The recommendation is that the tentative agreement that has been ratified by CFESP be accepted. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the CFESP contract?
I move that the Cedar Falls Community School District Board of Education approve the Cedar Falls Educational Support Professionals 2019-2020 contract as presented.
Thank you, Sasha. Do we have a second?
Second?
It's been seconded by Susie. Any other questions or comments?
Would like to comment, there was a good article tonight about some of our support staff in the Waterloo Courier, and the work that our support staff does has a tremendous impact on the quality of education that our students get, and I'm glad we hire such good people here.
We're extremely fortunate.
Thank you for the shout out for that. I'm sure we greatly appreciate them also. Okay, shall we vote? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you. Now, item K on the agenda, the approval of the 2019-2020 school year calendar. Dr. Pattee.
Yes, within the packets and online, we have the proposed 1920 school calendar. This is something that we've now had before the board as kind of an informational item for several months, as well as the public hearing this evening. Very similar calendar to this school year. Just a reminder for board members and community, there's Iowa code requirements that we can't start before August 23rd. So that means the logical date to start is Monday the 26th. That is the same date that the Waterloo School Districts, the Waterloo Catholic Schools, and actually UNI is starting. So it's all similar, and we try to be as similar as possible across the Cedar Valley when it comes to calendars to make those more alike than different. A couple of the comments from board members after the last couple of meetings, we did highlight the potential inclement weather days at the end of the school year and try to kind of delineate some of the PD days with vacation holidays that are within the calendar. This is something that we recommend approval for, and we know, knock on wood, hopefully next year weather-wise will be much better than this year.
We can only hope. All right, do I have a motion to approve the calendar?
I move that the Cedar Falls Community School District Board of Education approve the 2019-2020 school year calendar as presented.
Thank you, Jenny. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Sasha. Any questions or comments?
Just a quick question. So you said that the commencements of school is lined up with UNI. Is spring break also lined up with Waterloo and Catholic schools and UNI?
It is. I am pretty certain with the Waterloo and the Catholic schools, but certainly with UNI. We follow their calendar when it comes to that break to ensure that we have alignment, because we have so much carryover with staff, students, faculty.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion is carried. Now, moving on to the approval of the board member resignation.
And this is a formality because, as we all know, and we would congratulate Eric on his election to the Senate in the Iowa House, or the Senate seat that he won just recently. This is, again, a formality because Eric did resign effective March 25th at noon, so it's something that as a board we can't say no to. I apologize for that, but it's one of those aspects where we know he's going to do great work for the entire state of Iowa within that Senate seat. We also know that there's several different timelines. I think the Courier did a really nice job with an article talking about a lot of those timelines, expectations for publishing, expectations for filling. Actually, Iowa Code says shall. You shall fill the vacancy by appointment. That's changed in the last 2 years through Iowa Code, so it's a requirement that we have. But we also know it's going to be a short-term vacancy in filling, because we know that there will be a bond election that we will put before our voters based on petitions that we know are out there in our community. So what we are looking at is filling that through appointment for probably roughly a 2-month time period. So we know that that's going to be something that as a board we will need to decide and move forward with, and all that's done on timelines and time expectations. Good news is I think that there are several very good, strong community members that have expressed interest in potentially being a part of the school district and the school board as they look into the future and either have children in the system or are community members that just say we understand how important education is as a holistic approach to making sure that we have a strong, vital economy and a strong, vital region. So that's been exciting too, as people have reached out and said this is something that we're interested in. So I think we're poised for some additional great things, but certainly we'll miss Mr. Giddens for his role on the board.
So just as a follow-up, so if someone is interested in filling Eric Giddens' seat on the school board, what should they do?
Typically what we do is we always do, or at least I do, a kind of a pre-orientation, so have them just reach out to Joyce or myself, and we set up meetings, and I'll go through, make sure everybody has kind of the same background and understanding and knowledge base to where to start from as far as what it means to be a school board member, what Iowa Code says, what the process looks like, and then potentially as we look to the future, what running for a school board member may mean, because we know that that is something with the upcoming elections, especially now shifting towards November, that's just changes the dynamics of school board elections.
And so that would be in June, and they got to get like signatures collected?
Yep.
Right.
Yep, and hand out the candidate booklet to them that's most recently updated that talks about the number of signatures, the process, the election background, and just all the different regulations and requirements that somebody has to walk through to be a candidate for school board.
Another question. That they would be filling Eric's seat from a June election. His term ran till when? Could you remind us?
Yep, so that would be through November of 2021. So we have 4-year terms on the school board, so an appointment would be for a short term. Filling that through an election process at the next election of the school board would then be for filling that through November of 2021.
Any other question? Well, let's hear the motion first, and then we'll go into discussion.
I move that the Cedar Falls Community School District Board of Education accept the resignation of Cedar Falls Community School Board Director Eric Giddens as presented.
Thank you, Jeff. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Hassman. Now, any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you. Now we're moving on to item M on the agenda, the superintendent's report.
Yeah, several different items, and one that is just a kind of a follow-up from our last community presentation at Aldrich, which would be number 5. But hard to believe, commencement is May 26th. We'll start to need to think about who would like to hand out diplomas at graduation, because that's always fun. I do know that there will be one board member that will put his hand up very quickly for that. But again, we're looking for if there's somebody else that would be interested in that as well. Service recognition, every year we have a service recognition for individuals in our district that has served for over 10 years and are resigning or retiring from the district, and that's May 21st, 415 at Pheasant Ridge. April 22nd informational report, we'll have CAPS. We have the board retreat June 12th at 9:30 a.m. And again, number 5, facility update, is I always like to be able to report back to the board on the last presentation that we have provided, and this one was at Aldrich Elementary last week. There is a presentation that I just wanted to make sure that I went through. Again, this is now looking back from that presentation a week ago, so this is the actual presentation that we provided. So this is, again, just a thank you slide, and the focus of that night was really talking about instructional spaces and the fact that they make a significant difference in how we teach and learn. Janelle did a wonderful job describing within her update newsletter the excitement, the energy, the students walking into those spaces at Orchard Hill, and I can tell you the staff and parents felt the same way. When you go into a trailer, when you walk into a room that has no windows or poorly lit, research shows that facilities, your space that you're within, the teaching and learning is significantly impacted within better learning environments. So just a reminder, and talked with the group there at Aldrich, that we've gone through a process now, a multi-step process of discovery, trying to figure out then the what with the strategy, and now the how with the implementation of what does learning look like within Cedar Falls, especially at the secondary level as we look at facilities. So we know that we went through Insight Week here about 18 months ago. We had hundreds of different people involved with that, community leaders, business leaders, parents, students and staff, and just a huge representation really around the central question of what does learning look like. We know learning has changed. We know the needs of students, staff, employers, industries have shifted dramatically. We have to make sure that we're competitive and continue to provide excellence in what we do for our students and their success. A lot of different photos from Insight Week. It was really great to have 4 days of feedback and input and dialogue all around learning and education. Out of that came really 3 main drivers that people with a lot of clarity shared with us what they would see for a new high school building. A, connectedness. Something that has a connected feeling that brings together academic disciplines, that brings about engagement, collaboration, ability to have multiple levels of critical thinking throughout the building that's not just based on a very traditional model that from the 1950s, 70 years ago. So they want something that's really connected to not only external, internal, but also cross-sectioning of educational opportunities. They want communication and co-location. They really want to make sure, like our CAPS model and other models that we have, that we are bringing in co-location into the building, that we have engaging opportunities, that when you walk into the building, you feel that this is a place that is exciting and really awakens kind of that flame of learning for you, and diversity. And the diversity one was hard to come up with. How do we verbalize that, because we have a lot of maybe mental cues when we think of diversity, but this was diversity in student choice, comfort, flexibility, dynamic and adaptable spaces that accommodate all learning styles for students, multiple teaching strategies for our adults that allow for flexibility and adaptability. Key principles that came out of that: safety and security. Making sure that we have a location that expands opportunities but also provides better access and efficiencies across the board. And the last one too, and people talked a great deal about this, how do we maximize our taxpayer dollars for a 70-year vision, for a 70-year investment, not a short-term investment, by trying to do something that maybe is not as effective short-term and long-term. The next slide talks a little bit about capacity needs. And we do know that we are at capacity and over capacity as we look at our enrollment, because we've grown. And it's exciting to see the amount that we've grown, but we also know that education has shifted and changed over the multiple last decades that high school has served our community. So this is a question that comes up. And it's a question that says, in 1970s, I had bigger classes. Why is it out of space? And I think there's a multi-tiered answer to this, and I think it's important for people to know that 19% of the building that is currently in existence is not being utilized for what it was originally intended, or things that were never ever thought about when that building was built. We have over 20 sections of classes to support students with special needs, and that was the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, that came about in 1975. During the late 70s, we did not serve many students with special needs. And now you can't even think about having a well-rounded educational experience without those multitude of sections and classes and serving those students. We never even thought about robotics, our rocket club that Janelle just presented on, all those different multi-leveled courses for college-level classes taught in our high school that allows for deeper student learning and engagement and opportunities that were never there. And we do have pictures of students of 37 and 39 students sitting in rows and desks within a high school in 1973, 1975. And that we know that there's much better ways to provide educational opportunities, equity, and learning than what it might have been back in the 1970s, 80s, because we know much more about research. We know much more about pedagogy and strategies. Next slide. We also hear that how do you know you're going to grow as you look to the future? We know our demographers looked at different enrollment projections, but what we now say is let's look backwards. Let's look at our enrollment over the last 10 years, and we've grown over 19%, almost 20% in growth over the last 10 years, and this doesn't include our 110 students from last year, and that's the 18th largest increase in Iowa during the same time frame. So people then sometimes will say, well, and let's talk about knowing we've grown, knowing we anticipate further growth. Have we looked at other strategies, looked at other options? And as the board knows, we've had multiple presentations on the existing high school, that sites and options that are there. Options like at College Square Mall, which is not feasible. It's not reasonable, or is it cost effective or efficient? Looked at other sites across our community. Inside city limits, outside city limits, and obviously a few years ago we purchased the 50 acres west of the Unidome that we know is a spot that we could grow and thrive as a district for multiple generations to come. So then people sometimes will say, well, let's think about that 50 acres. That sounds like a large site, large location. So you look at the next slide, we do know that recent high schools across the state of Iowa, including Johnston High School, which was just opened last year. This is their second year. Waukee just passed a bond for $112 million for their second high school because their first high school is approaching 2,000 students, and they have about 100 acres on that site. You look at the smallest one on there besides us, which is the Ames Proposed High School. They just recently passed a $112 million bond for a new high school, replacing a high school the same era, a little bit newer than our current high school for $112 million on their 70 acres. We know that we have a unique model because UNI is a great partner, so 50 acres is a right size because we can be efficient, effective, and be able to co-use green spaces, similar to what we've done with tennis courts and other opportunities. So for us to have a unique model, certainly in Iowa, I would say across the Midwest and maybe even across the nation, to be able to have a regent plus a high school be able to be efficient and effective makes sense. What's interesting is when you look at the center of campus, UNI's campus to the current high school and the center of campus to the new site, the difference is about 160 feet. I'd have to go back and look at that. So it's basically similar, but the access and the availability for sharing and student opportunities and learning is just profound. We also shared at Aldrich a week ago that we do know that the building's been added on 13 times. That's why it's so disjointed and so disconnected and so inefficient in space and allocation and movement and corridors that abruptly end or hallways that don't have light and natural light and other aspects. So next slide. We also hear from people sometimes, and this is what we talked about at Aldrich. Well, you may build a Taj Mahal if you look at what could be done or has been done, and that's something that sometimes can be a fear aspect or technique. That's easy to benchmark regionally, nationally on what are the national square feet per student in a high school. So when you look at the square footage, that includes gymnasium and restrooms and classroom spaces and office spaces. So it's in the entirety of the building. We know that we don't want to be on the high end. We don't want to be necessarily on the low end because we want something that's going to meet our needs for the next 50 to 70 years. That's adaptable, that's flexible, that's beneficial to impact our region for years to come. So we know that we can find that nice median where it's going to fit in and meet the needs of our community, meet the needs of our students and staff for the next 70 years. So that's not difficult to do when you start looking at what are those square footage benchmarks. Again, we want to be someplace where it makes sense, kind of in that moderate range. The next slide, I guess let's go back one slide, because this is something that comes up quite frequently too. Sometimes people will say, when you look at the overall square footage, and you think about how large of a building we will need, we have to plan for growth. So some of this square footage is actually making the common spaces a little bit larger. So 15, 20, 30 years from now, if we do have to add on to a building, we have the capacity, because the capacity truly is in your common spaces. If you don't have common spaces that can't accommodate 1,600, 1,800 students, then you cannot add on to it and really have an efficient building and an efficient design and a use to educate students. So this is a little bit inflated too, because we want to make sure our common spaces are adequately sized. And we've been through Johnston, I know other people have, and that's a very adaptable building as you look at a comparison. So we'd be more at that range when you look at the overall square feet per student, based on the fact that common spaces would be sized a little bit larger. Tax rates, Danelle did a wonderful job talking about the top 5 up and bottom 5 down from us. I always look at the 25 largest districts. We are actually the 3rd from the bottom, the 3rd lowest of the largest 25 districts for overall property tax rate. That's going down again 10 more cents, and several of those districts just passed recent bonds. Ames Community School District just passed a $110 million bond. Ankeny, which is on the higher end, just passed a $117 million bond. And sometimes what people ask here, and this is what I brought up with the group at Aldridge, well, it's based on your assessed valuations. Because you have high property values, you have a lower tax rate. Our property values, in comparison with a lot of the Des Moines metro schools or other growing, thriving schools, are not different. In fact, we could be on the lower end when you looked at assessed valuations of those. But here's what I would say. When you look at the research for sustainable communities that are thriving and growing have some things in common. One, excellent school districts. Investment in their school districts that pay dividends for years to come and that attracts people. 2, you have a business climate that attracts and retains businesses, that continues to grow the economy, which we know we have. You have an environment that has recreational opportunities, cultural opportunities, opportunities to really expand enrichment for our community members, which we know we have across our community as well. Those are some of the key cornerstones of thriving, sustainable communities, and if you don't have any of those cornerstones, you typically don't grow. And that's why that investment in the community is so important, and why we have very good home assessments similar to what Ankeny or Waukee or Johnston or some of those other communities have. But we have not had some of those bonds that some of those communities have had in investments into their school infrastructure. Next slide talks a little bit about the overall, growth in our community. And a lot of people that have lived here for several generations don't realize we are now larger than we've really ever been in the past as a community. 1950, you can see the size of our community when we were built. When the high school was built. I always think it's really interesting as we look at future growth and where we believe we're going to continue. What I find really intriguing is 91% of home buyers consider schools as one of their primary factors before they buy a home. And we know that's an important factor. And we have so many people that ask for tours of buildings, ask for to be able to see what the schools provide. And we know that is an area that we have lost actually some staff members and some community members because of the level of the facility at the high school. The quality of education, top notch. But we know there's some things we can't do because of the facilities, and that limits us. Next slide, and I love this little heat map. It's just a historical context of our community. 1950, the little red dot over there on the far left side is actually where the high school was built in 1950s, early 50s. Everything west of the high school was actually cornfields. Currently today, you can kind of see the residential footprint of our community, and the little white box in the middle is the current high school and how much infills occurred across our community. Where the proposed high school, the new high school site is at, then is in that yellow area. Then as we look to the next 70 years and we look at the growth and the residential capacity that we know is going to continue to expand, it's exciting to see. But we also know it means a changing economy, a changing culture, and helping to have those facilities to prepare our students for what's next. So next slide, summary. We knew that through all this process that we've gone through, there are several bullet points that have come out of it, but I think the second to last is one of the most important educationally. We've talked about how we focus as an investment, what we need to do for safety and security, what we need to do to make sure that we look at technology for multiple meetings. Now, 21st century learning needs, how do we make sure we focus in on that educationally? So as you go to the next slide, we have really worked hard to put out facts versus myths, to put out flyers and informational components to make sure that people understand what is the current reality, what are the facts that go along with this. And we have those in multiple different locations. We've handed them out at presentations. We're going to continue to push those out to multiple different groups and everybody that can possibly get out to individuals in our community, because again, the facts are extremely important to be able to understand and delineate from. I think the next slide goes into a little bit more about some of the educational components. This is a high-level schematic. We know we know as we look to the future to have adaptable space, flexible space, space that accommodates students working individually or in small group, but also collectively in large groups, but then having breakout areas to be able to be flexible for the learner into the future is important. We also know that having a heart area, similar to what we've done in Aldrich, that's welcoming, that invites our community in, instead of not really being engaging or exciting as an area to focus on learning. That's something that's important into the future. That's okay. Janelle's trying to speed me up. So as we look at other locations then, has this been done? Yeah. Johnston, we've toured. This is our second year for Johnston. Next slide shows some of their open areas and welcoming areas, collaborative spaces in comparison to ours that are very limiting or not necessarily inviting or very dated or certainly not having the educational technology component that we know is important. The last one was Johnston. This one again is one of our classrooms where you have to sit in certain locations to be able to access technology, sometimes even to be able to have connection to technology, because there's parts of the building that you cannot even have cell phone reception in due to the way it's built and the way it's constructed. So next slide kind of shows a little bit more about the congestion and the challenging environments that we have within some of our classrooms. Then you look at Johnston as a comparative slide with their natural light and adaptable seating and the research that shows that makes a significant difference. Some of their flexible seating and areas that they invite students to have areas of breakout and engagement. And then just some of the other spaces that they have. So you can click through these probably fairly quickly as we look at what Johnston has accomplished and certainly done. We do have a short video that we shared that night as well, so I think we want to share that. Again, this was the presentation that we shared last week, so we talked about with the community that we wanted them to have a tour of Aldrich Elementary, to be able to see some of the things that we just talked about, and the fact that facilities, environment makes a significant impact when you look at learning, when you look at strategy, when you look at how that makes a difference, not only for students and staff, but you look at how that makes a difference for our community as an investment strategy and a growth strategy for the future. So I think at this time we'll show the short video with some of our students and staff and take some questions.
Something that's been on my mind a lot are all the doors and openings, and we talk about security and just that the door, it's so easy to get in and kids are walking out in the middle of the day, in and out all the time, so I think that's a really important need to have one place where everybody goes in and can be monitored.
If you don't get here early enough and you're like already rushing late and you're kind of stressed about that, then you're not going to get a parking spot, and so you're going to have to park far away, and usually it's down one of the streets like 11th Street. There's parking on one side, and the street's pretty narrow. So if a car's coming this way and a car's coming another way, it's sometimes you have to ride the curb to not get hit by the other car.
I feel so bad for the people that live around here, because it's like we're always parked outside their house. We're constantly moving. They're trying to get into their driveway, and we're trying to get a decent parking spot. But like, I feel really bad for them.
We we've outgrown the building, and so we have teachers that have offices and closets. We actually have classrooms that were originally intended for closet space are now classroom space. What was storage space has now become classroom space. We've tried to utilize every inch we could of the building, which then doesn't leave us a whole lot of flexibility to do a lot of really neat collaborative things that we could be doing and need to be doing for our students to be successful in today's society.
By the end of the day, they're just really worn out because we think like, oh, they're kids, they can suck it up, but it's really hard to learn if you're hot all day. And we are expecting them to learn difficult things. I teach college composition. We're expecting them to be able to engage their brains, create something, use research. And if you've been uncomfortable to the point of sort of exhaustion all day, that's a difficult thing to do.
It's not easy to learn when you're sweating in one classroom and then you go to your next classroom and you want 14 blankets on because it's too cold. So, that's definitely been an issue.
So some people say, I didn't have air conditioning back then and I was just fine. So I go back to, let's say, John Deere, which is a prevalent company around here. What if their argument was when they have engineers show up to their place and say, well, hey, we want to be the best company. We want to get the best engineers to come here, but we don't need air conditioning because we made it just fine early on. We don't need it now. They wouldn't be where they are today. If their whole thought process was, hey, we were doing just fine the way we were, and they didn't evolve, they wouldn't be where they're at. They wouldn't be the juggernaut of farm in the farm industry they are now. And that's true of any business. They have to continually evolve. They have to continue to look at what's best for their business to provide the best programming, the best experiences for their clients and for their people they work with. Us as a school district, we're in the same boat. It's not different in that. We want to do what we can to provide the best experience and best opportunities for our students so they can be competitive in today's society.
I'm on the 3rd floor, and our projectors are mounted on the ceiling. But when anybody walks across the floor, the whole thing shakes. And so if there's a kid in class, that just had this nervousness, and I do the same thing, your legs shaking, literally the whole classroom shakes.
A common mindset of people that may be against us improving the facilities, or I know it's money, right, that it comes down to, and so they maybe don't want to make that investment personally, but they often have the mindset of, well, if it's good enough for me, then why isn't it good enough for the next group of students that are coming through? And my kickback to that is always, well, when did you graduate? Well, good enough for you, 10, 20, 30 years ago is very different than good enough now, because this building has deteriorated in those 10 years. And I know we have improvements to the building, but it's a facade because it's oftentimes on the front side of the building, and most of our instruction, most of our classes happens on the back side of the building where most of our core classes are, some of our electives are in the older parts of the building. And so having not set foot in this building and having to navigate this building if you haven't graduated within the last 10, 20, 30 years is a very different look. And so yeah, good enough back then and good enough now, it's a different building than even though it's the same one in a lot of areas, it doesn't operate the same way that it used to.
Technology has advanced, education has advanced, our world has advanced, and we have to keep up with that. If we want our kids to learn and we want our kids to grow, then we have to be willing to not be stuck where we were 20, 10, 30, 50 years ago. We have to be willing to move forward to meet the needs of our kids where they're at and who those kids are today that aren't the same kids that were when we were kids.
Just navigating the building, if you're in a wheelchair, if you're on crutches, or if your mobility is impaired in any sort of way, it's a tough building to navigate.
I'm not looking for empathy. I want equal opportunity. I want to be able to go through this building like any other teenager and go to my classes and be able to just sit and learn and not have to worry about all of this extra stuff. I want to be able to roll into my class, sit under my desk, and open up my book. And when the bell rings, I want to be able to just go to my next class and do it all over again. That's really what I want.
So again, that's as we continue to have deeper conversations to talk about some of those investments and really that why behind what we're trying to accomplish as we look to the future. We know that there are so many experts that are in our buildings each and every day that can talk about the challenges, and that's what we're trying to continue to enhance is what this means, what does this look like, and what are we hopefully going to accomplish well into the future. It was really exciting with the tours at Aldrich. We had multiple people that had not been in the building, and our students gave the tours, and I can say the comments after those tours, it was remarkable as the students talked about their experiences coming into that building with the brand new opening this year, and some of the things that they were able to do based on the facilities and the spaces that are there. The students could really communicate that effectively and really sometimes in the best ways possible. Questions?
Questions for Andy? Thoughts? Great video. It has a lot of impactful information in it. I guess what I would say is if you're a community member and you're watching us tonight and you have questions or comments, please reach out to the district. They will try to answer your questions, all of them. And if you have a concern or you just want to know, is this the truth or is it not true? Janelle, Dr. Pattee, actually anybody in the administration building or any of our administrators should be able to answer those questions. Even the people that are sitting around this table, the board members, we can answer those questions for you. This is important to our community. This is important to our students. It's not going to get less expensive. It's only going to get more expensive the longer we put this off. And so this time around, let's come together as a community and let's look at those things and let's start talking about this in a positive climate for our kids. Thank you. All right, moving on. Questions or comments or concerns from board members? We had on the bottom of our agenda that we were going to go into a strategy negotiations session, but that has been canceled, so we will not be doing that after we adjourn. If I don't hear questions or comments, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
It's been moved by Susie. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Jeff. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Thank you.